Good morning. Let's do a quick sound check. If you can hear me, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Great. Welcome to the Fiscal 2027 Panelist Training Session. I'm Claudia Arzeno. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-directors of the Program Services Unit at the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. For accessibility purposes, I will now turn my camera on to give you a visual description of myself. I am a Puerto Rican woman with dark brown hair and dark brown eyes. My hair is tied back into a ponytail today, and I'm wearing a dress that has a green and pink pattern. I'm going to turn my camera back off until the Q&A.
Hey everyone, I'm Rachel Jennison. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a program officer at the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. For accessibility purposes, I will now turn my camera on to give a brief visual description of myself. I'm a white woman. I have reddish brown hair and blue eyes, and today I'm wearing a dress which is white and blue and sort of a maroon color. And now I will turn it back to Claudia.
Thank you, Rachel. As an employee of the City of New York, I acknowledge with gratitude the ancient and current stewards of the lands and waters we currently know as the five boroughs, which have been cared for over millennia by the Lenape, Canarsie, Lakawe, Wappinger, Matinecock, and Schaghticoke people. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban Native American indigenous populations in the United States. This training session will provide an overview of what you need to know to serve as a panelist for the FY27 Cultural Development Fund. If you have not done so already, we suggest you review the Panelist Handbook document for access to instructions and resources to guide your application review process. Next slide, please. A note on accessibility. We've created this presentation with accessibility in mind. For a live transcript, please click on the closed caption icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. This icon looks like two C's within a box. A copy of this presentation that is accessible by screen readers may be requested via email to disabilityfacilitator@culture.nyc.gov. A link to the Panelist Handbook can be accessed in the confirmation emails you received from our panel and operations specialist, Jillian Fallon. Everything we are presenting today can be found in the handbook. This session is being recorded. The recording will be posted with closed captioning on DCLA's YouTube channel in the coming days, and you will have access to it via the link in the Panelist Handbook. If you do not wish for your name to be included in this recording, please direct all communications to gfallon@culture.nyc.gov rather than using the Q&A feature of this presentation. Next slide, please. I will first share with you some guiding information about the Cultural Development Fund and your role as a panelist. I will then go over the panel process, the timeline, and discuss what the CDF funds, as well as what it does not fund. Rachel will go through the evaluative criteria, scoring, and share a demonstration of the Salesforce portal, as well as a recording of a mock panel produced by Program Services Unit staff. Finally, we will talk about payment. At the very end, we'll have time for a Q&A session. We ask that you hold all questions until the Q&A session in case your question gets answered during the presentation. Next slide, please. The Cultural Development Fund is DCLA's public-facing mechanism for awarding funding to nonprofit organizations for cultural services. Proposals are evaluated by a panel of peers from the New York City cultural field. The purpose of each panel is to provide an overall average score per application, which is what is used by DCLA to determine funding recommendations. The role of the panelist is to evaluate and score applications based on the 3 CDF equity-driven criteria. Next slide, please. There are a few critical policies that will guide your work throughout this process. The first is consistency. The CDF competitive process is application-based, not reputation-based, for all FY27 CDF applicants. Apply consistent standards across all criteria for each application. The next is confidentiality. You have certified that you will not disclose anything from these panel proceedings. Likewise, we certify that we will not attribute your feedback when advising applicants. Upon request, we share the names of the panelists reviewed an organization's application, but applicants are given strict instructions not to contact you individually or directly. The third is conflict of interest. Abstain from evaluating any application for an organization or stakeholder with whom you or a relative have a recent financial or working relationship. DCLA will consider a panelist to be affiliated with an organization if they are related to the organization as director, officer, trustee, or employee, fundraiser or public relations officer, independent contractor who has received fees or payments in the year preceding the filing of the affiliation statement or any amendment thereto, holder of a financial advisory or policy-making role, or direct or indirect financial beneficiary of a DCLA grant or loan to or other contract with such an organization. DCLA will consider a panelist to be affiliated with an individual if they are related to the individual as an employee, board member, employer, consultant, agent, or dealer, or by blood, marriage, partnership, joint venture, or any other business association. Should you discover a conflict in your panel, you are recused from evaluating that proposal. Panelists will be expected to submit conflict of interest and affirm all information and commitments to participate fully in the panel process, including preparatory review and evaluation. You can review DCLA's Code of Ethics policy, which is in the appendix of the Panelist Handbook. Next slide, please. You will have 3 opportunities to generate a score and notes for each application. Round 1 review is to be completed prior to the panel day. This is a time for you to review each application independently and base your scores on your overall impression of how the application meets the criteria. Your notes should document reasoning for your score, questions, and feedback on the strengths and areas of improvement of the application. When working in the Panelist portal, remember to hit the Save button frequently to ensure that your notes and scores are saved. Please note that after 30 minutes of not saving, users will be automatically logged out of the portal. Round 2 review is completed on the panel day. This is a time to share your thoughts on each of the applications with your panel cohort in 8-minute discussions per application. The scores will be submitted after this round, and the notes from the conversation will be recorded and used for applicant feedback after grant award notification letters are sent. This is an opportunity to provide some of the feedback you have on the conversation, responding to co-facilitators' initial prompts. Be in conversation with your panel cohort. Review your notes shortly before the panel so that you can readily bring your perspective into the conversation and respond to each other. The confirmation review is completed in the last hour of the panel day. The co-facilitators will receive the submitted scores and will share each applicant's application score for the 3 criteria and the total average. Panelists will consider whether each score reflects a discussion and mark in a Zoom poll any application where they believe there is a disconnect between score and discussion. If 2 or more panelists decide a score does not reflect the discussion, there will be an additional timed 4-minute conversation about the application. Please use the option to vote for an application to be rediscussed wisely. Your votes will not be anonymous, and you will be called on to speak about the reasons why you requested an application to be rediscussed. If, after rediscussing, a majority of panelists decide to open an application again for rescoring, panelists will be able to adjust their score for that application accordingly. Next slide, please. In the weeks leading up to the panel day, panelists should allot at least 15 hours of preparatory time to independently review, score, and generate written feedback for all assigned proposals in round 1. These initial evaluations will be due 1 week prior to your panel day. Panelists will receive emails from DCLA and automated emails from the Panelist portal signaling any updates and reminders. We anticipate the total time commitment to be between 25 and 35 hours, including all the training, prep time, and serving on the panel itself, and depending on the number of applications that you are assigned to review. If for any reason you find that you are unable to serve as a panelist, you must notify DCLA immediately. Next slide, please. This slide shares the approximate schedule for the panel day. These times may not be exact, and it will be the DCLA staff's role to keep time during your evaluative discussions. We know that it can be difficult to participate in virtual meetings all day. We've built in breaks and will do our best to respond to your needs on the day of the panel. Each panel day will be held virtually over the course of one day, from 9:30 a.m. to approximately 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Panelists will engage in 8 minutes of discussion per application, followed by the final opportunity to confirm scores and feedback on each application at the end of the panel day. The schedules for the estimated timeline of events and the panel day are both in the Panelist Handbook. Next slide, please. The mission and purpose of the Cultural Development Fund remains to fund arts and cultural organizations for the extraordinary breadth and depth of cultural public services they offer. The fundamental requirement for all proposals is that they represent a cultural activity of recognized quality that is accountable and accessible to the New York City public during the grant period. On the screen, you will see a list of the disciplines DCLA considers cultural and thus funds, as well as those activities that DCLA does not consider cultural. Applicants must identify their overall artistic disciplinary focus of the organization, as well as the particular discipline of the proposed project. Applicants may select from the disciplines in this slide. It is up to the panel to confirm and interpret how the proposed project falls within the realm of arts and culture. Please note that we include the humanities and sciences in our definition of culture, but we do not include physical fitness, social services, religious activity, or general education like homework help. The disciplines that DCLA considers cultural are architecture design, botany ecology, crafts design, film, video, audio, humanities, history, literature, multidisciplinary, museum, new media, photography, science, theater, visual arts, and zoos. And again, physical fitness, social services, general education, including homework help and test prep, as well as any straightforward language classes, are not considered to be cultural activities. I will now pass it on to my colleague, Rachel Jennison. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Claudia. All applications will be evaluated based on the following 3 weighted evaluative criteria, which are listed in the Panelist Handbook. Those criteria are public service and impact, that's 35% of your score, organizational accountability, that is also 35% of your score, and quality, which comprises 30% of your score. Next slide, please. 35% of your score will be calculated on the application's evidence of public service and impact. Applications that score highly on this criterion are providing arts and/or cultural programming in the 5 boroughs of New York City during the grant period with consideration toward accessibility, affordability, and equity, and provide detail on the intentional effect of their cultural programming on the recipients of the service in alignment with the organization's stated goals. This criterion is heavily weighted. If you find projects that are outside of New York City, outside of Fiscal Year 27, or do not include impactful cultural services, your score should reflect that disconnect from the criterion. We will discuss how to score ineligible activity later on in the training. Evidence of public service and impact may include, for example, a project that invests in the cultural ecosystem or increases arts and cultural exposure, or explicit efforts to engage diverse audiences illustrative of the organization's community, such as programming a cross-cultural or culturally responsive project, empowering historically underserved neighborhoods with resources, or building key program partners. You can refer to the CDF guidelines or Panelist Handbook for more examples. Next slide, please. 35% of your score will be calculated on the application's evidence of organizational accountability. To score an application highly on this criterion, the organization must demonstrate accountability, sustainability, and the capacity to provide cultural programs that are accessible, equitable, realistic, and relevant to its mission, focus, and audiences served. This criterion is also heavily weighted, as the agency must ensure its grant agreements will be fulfilled as described by organizations who are inclusive, responsive, and responsible. Evidence may include, for example, responsible and stable fiscal planning appropriate to the organization's budget size and age, with a demonstration of delivering the proposed project, or strength of board and organizational leadership as demonstrated by organizational planning, participatory budgeting, board development, community engagement, or diverse outreach. Again, you can refer to the CDF guidelines or Panelist Handbook for more examples. Next slide, please. 30% of your score will be calculated based on evidence of quality in the applicant's presentation of its cultural programs. You'll apply an equitable standard that is appropriate to the participants in those disciplines and genres, and not in comparison to any single standard of excellence. Evidence of quality may include a comprehensive proposal with supporting materials that demonstrate the project's relevance to its community, clarity in its commitment, and confidence of its deliverability, or expertise and experience of program providers, including artists, educators, speakers, and others. Please keep in mind that as tempting as it will be to evaluate an applicant's quality based solely on their submitted background materials and potential work samples, it is important to look at the whole application when evaluating quality. For example, do you clearly understand the proposed program? Does the organization's previous activity show that they have experience producing the program? And do past audiences numbers show demand? Have they shared accolades for the organization or credentials of key program providers in the mission and history section or in the background materials? Next slide, please. Your review of the application should be holistic, and you may find evidence of each criterion throughout the application. Sections of the application that are commonly used to evaluate the public service and impact criterion include, but are not limited to, the project narrative, that would be the project synopsis and project description, the audience engagement section, previous activities, and attendance. Sections of the applications that are commonly used to evaluate organizational accountability include, but again are not limited to, the annual operating and project budget and notes, the mission, history, and principal activities section, audience engagement, accessibility, and staff information. And then some examples of sections of the application that are commonly used to evaluate quality are many of them: mission, history, and principal activities, audience engagement, project narrative, education programs, if applicable, previous activities, attendance, organizational background materials, and work samples if they've been included in the application. Next slide, please. We've said before that the fundamental requirement for all proposals is that they represent a cultural activity of recognized quality that is accountable and accessible to the New York City public during the grant period. This is important enough to repeat. We fund services of both breadth and depth. We can support free performances that reach thousands for a few hours. We also support training programs or residencies that provide a handful of people with an experience of great artistic growth. The applicant's proposed project does not have to be for the general public, although it might be. Applicants are charged with describing their intended audience and how they plan to conduct outreach to this audience. For example, a program might be intended for school children, artists, or to serve other cultural organizations. The audience and outreach must be clear, and the project should not be internal capacity building for the organization, for example, training their own staff. The creation and presentation of artistic work for and/or by your community, as well as other types of activities that serve residents, artists, and visitors in New York City are considered valuable services. Next slide, please. As this is public programmatic funding, we need to clearly understand the proposed programming that CDF funds would support. Primarily, you need to understand what is the cultural public service requesting the city's investment. If any aspect of the cultural public service proposed in the project narrative is unclear or does not meet the agency's funding requirements, we expect your scores will reflect that in any or all of the criteria-based scores. As a reminder, The project needs to be cultural in nature, regardless of how deserving the proposed constituency is. Once again, we do consider the sciences and humanities to fall under DCLA's definition of culture, but not general education like homework help, social services, or physical education. The project needs to take place during the city's fiscal year, and the project needs to take place within the 5 boroughs of New York City. We will discuss how to score ineligible activity in a few minutes. Next slide, please. The financial feasibility of a proposed project and an organization's fiscal standing are also important points of information when assessing applications, particularly under the organizational accountability criterion. Budgets and budget notes are an opportunity for applicants to demonstrate responsible and stable fiscal planning, appropriate to their organization's budget size and age, as well as their ability to deliver the proposed project. DCLA can fund up to 75% of the total cost of a project, and applicants are advised to request an amount that is realistic and related to the size of award they are eligible for. The guidelines list the minimum and maximum award amounts in each budget category. Applicants may request more than the published maximum if they anticipate receiving City Council member items, Create NYC funding, or equity funding. If any additional funding is anticipated, then the sources should be detailed in the budget notes. Competitive proposals may include a budget that shows diverse funding streams. This includes a mix of individual donations, earned income, foundation and corporate support, and other government support where appropriate. Note, however, that the diversity of funding streams may also be impacted by the size and age of an organization and not wholly reflective of their fiscal accountability. Applicants are asked to detail some sources of income and expenses in the budget notes. For the budget lines that require explanation, the notes should clearly align with and provide additional context for what has been budgeted. Organizations are not expected to show balanced annual operating budgets, as there are multiple reasons why any year's budget may have ended with a surplus or deficit. However, the origin and impact of the surplus or deficit and how the organization did or will address it should be explained in the related budget note. Overall, we encourage you to review the budget section holistically, reading the budgets together with the related notes. Consider whether the applicant has provided a clear picture of their fiscal health by directly and thoroughly responding to the questions asked and adequately addressing any anomalies, discrepancies, or areas of concern in their budget notes. For panelists that would like additional guidance on reviewing application budgets, we have created a short supplemental budget tutorial, which is linked in the chat. Next slide, please. Now we'll discuss the difference between programmatic background materials and programmatic work samples. Programmatic background materials are a required part of the application. Background materials will include a PDF of up to 10 pages maximum and may include marketing materials, press clips, letters of recommendation, curricula, artist biographies, programs, etc. Background materials must not include any links. If they have included links, you should not click them. Work samples give an opportunity for applicants to showcase their best programming relevant to their project proposal. Work samples are optional. Panelists should not penalize organizations for not submitting a work sample. Work samples can be one of 3 things: a 2-page PDF of images or creative writing, links to specific programmatic web pages or social media posts, or Vimeo and/or YouTube links showing audiovisual work. Applicants can include up to 2 work samples, and links to materials must be publicly accessible through fall of 2026 and not password protected. Applicants can indicate a starting point for any submitted video sample, and panelists should spend up to 2 minutes reviewing each submitted work sample. Next slide, please. Your final scores will be the primary determinant of any funding allocated. As a result, it's important that you feel comfortable and confident using all of the scores. In other words, please don't score everything a 10 or everything a 6. Really think about how the application does or does not meet the criteria. One way to decide on which score to give is to establish how many questions you have about the application with regard to the criteria, or how clear you are regarding the criteria. 0. Use this score if any of the following is true. The proposed program is not cultural. The proposed program is taking place outside of New York City. The proposed program is taking place outside of the fiscal year. The proposed program is for a city council initiative. That would be something like CASA or SUCASA. The application does not show evidence of the criteria, or there is insufficient detail to evaluate the criteria. In other words, if you are missing the majority of the what, when, where, why, who, how many, how much for the proposed program. In other words, there are many unanswered questions. 3 is fair. Use this score if the application shows limited evidence of criteria. This application has merit but may lack detail or clarity. 6 is good. Use this score if the application shows strong evidence of the criteria. This application has clearly met the criteria. And 10 is exceptional. Use this score if the application exemplifies the criteria. This is the tip top. The application has gone above and beyond in its detail and clarity to show evidence of the criteria. In other words, you have no lingering questions or constructive criticism of the application under the criterion being evaluated. One question we receive a lot is how to score an application that includes ineligible content. Determine how much of what is being proposed is ineligible. If, for example, the whole project is not cultural, the whole project is taking place outside of New York City or outside of the fiscal year, or is for a city council initiative, then you would score it a 0. If only portions of the proposed project are ineligible, you would determine whether that ineligible component is a large part or a small part of the project, which would then help determine if it should be scored a 3 or a 6. Every case is unique, but an application that is proposing a project with ineligible portions should not score a 10. Applicants have been clearly instructed to not include ineligible activity in their project narrative. Next slide, please. We understand that we've recruited experts in the field to serve as panelists, so we expect that panelists may recognize some of the organizations on their assigned panel. If you worked for an organization listed in your assigned panel within the past 1 to 5 years, or you listed an organization as a conflict of interest, you must abstain from reviewing and scoring the organization's application. If you worked for an organization over 5 years ago, you may choose whether it is appropriate to abstain or not. To abstain from voting, please check the abstain box on your scorecard for that organization. You will not be able to score them in round 1, and you will be temporarily placed in a breakout room of the Panel Day Zoom meeting for the duration of the application's discussion. If you currently work at an organization applying for CDF funding, you are unable to serve on the panel their application is being reviewed in. The criteria for conflicts of interest and what qualifies as an abstention can be found in the Panelist Handbook. Next slide, please. In a moment, we will play a video demonstrating how to use our Salesforce database. You can also find instructions on how to access the applications in the handbook. We will go over how to log in, how to access the dashboard, how to review the application materials, and how to submit scores and feedback. These instructions are also listed in the portal navigation guide linked in the handbook. Before the demonstration, I have a couple of reminders about registration. If you haven't already, you will receive an auto-generated email from Salesforce inviting you to register for a CDF account and create an NYC ID login, which will allow you to access the applications and submit your scores online. If you did not yet register, please check for an email with the subject line FY27 Cultural Development Fund Panel for instructions on how to do so. 2 to 4 weeks before the panel day, you will receive an auto-generated email from Salesforce containing a link that will notify you of an update to your account. We'll now play the video.
You will receive an auto-generated email from Salesforce notifying you when applications for your assigned panel are ready to review. The email will contain a link to the portal login. Log in with your NYC ID credentials and you will be able to view the panelist dashboard to access your scorecards and application materials. When you've logged into the portal, you will see a menu on the left-hand side with a panel review option and your assigned panel title directly below. Click on the panel title. The page will contain a scoring scale, 0, 3, 6, and 10, as well as their definitions. The descriptions of the 3 evaluative criteria are also on this page. If you scroll further down, you will find your scorecards for rounds 1 and 2, which have panel start and end dates. Round 1 scores will be completed independently before the panel meeting day. Round 2 scores will be completed on panel day during the panel meeting. In this page view, you will also see rows of collapsed scorecards of all assigned applications in your panel. The scorecards contain menu options for accessing the application materials, as well as the fields for scoring each application. Once you are finished scoring and providing feedback to all assigned applications and all of your scorecards for the round are in the status of ready to submit, you will scroll back up and click Submit All Scorecards. When expanding each application's row, you will see tabs for rounds 1 and 2, fields for scoring and written feedback, and View Download buttons on the right-hand corner of each application scorecard. When clicking the View Download button, a drop-down will appear. This has application and organizational background materials. Upon clicking either of these options, a PDF file of the document will download and open in a new window. To begin scoring an application, you must have downloaded the application file. Note that any optional work samples that an applicant may have submitted will also appear in the View Download dropdown. Also in the top right-hand corner of the scorecard is a checkbox for abstentions. When this box is checked, the dialog box you see will appear. It asks you to confirm that you will be abstaining from scoring this application. If you click yes, you will no longer have access to viewing the application materials and the scorecard. To the left of the abstain checkbox, you will also see the status of each application scoring for rounds 1 and 2. Open means not started. In progress means the scorecard is partially filled out. Ready to submit means the scorecard has been completely filled out. And completed means the scorecard has been submitted and it is no longer editable. Be sure to save often, as the system automatically logs out after 30 minutes of inactivity.
Next slide, please. Now we will show you a short video of a mock panel. The purpose of the mock panel is to provide you with an example of what an actual panel is like and to demonstrate how to have a productive 8-minute discussion about an organization's application before entering your round 2 scores into the scorecard. Next slide.
Okay, so next we're going to discuss the application from Nexus Arts Collective. Before I read the description, everyone make sure that you're in the round 2 tab of the scorecard and click on the application record. The application file should now open in a new tab. And if you want to refer to your notes, you can click on the round 1 tab for each application, as what you previously submitted will be saved there. So Lotta, you'll be starting this discussion when I'm done introducing. The Nexus Arts Collective asks for visions of restoration, contemporary curating, and civic care. The series explores civic-minded curating that prioritizes healing, ecological kinship, and community care. Developed by a global network of BIPOC curators, these talks bring international perspectives to New York audiences. In tandem, our Curatorial Leadership Laboratory, CLL, will provide 6 months of free professional development, workshops, and mentorship to 6 emerging BIPOC curators based in New York City. Your round 1 average score for this application was 4.99. There were a lot of different scores and notes for this application, so I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Laudan, why don't you kick us off? What were the strengths and weaknesses of this application?
Yeah, that's interesting because I did not score it that highly. So I really struggled with this one. So I'm really curious to hear others as well. I mean, I think that their sort of like initial mission is of supporting independent curators is interesting, but I struggled to sort of get a sense of who they are and what they do, and that kind of carried over into the project, and this idea of public service and impact, like, wanting to know. I just really was struggling to see that, and I was confused about some of the things that they had mentioned about pay for mentors, and their audience engagement was a little vague to me. I wasn't really sure about the numbers served, and then I definitely gave it a lower score because I saw that they have a date of one of their events that's outside of the grant period, and that's something that I think I'm curious to hear about, like how we're supposed to score that, because I did score it low for that reason. Their information on disability access was strong, but especially ASL, but I did really want a lot more information about who and how and why they partner with that. Their budget seemed a little inconsistent. Like, this project is so small compared to their full organizational budget. I just had a lot of questions, and so I couldn't really get up to a higher score on this one, and including the stuff about ineligible activity. I didn't really feel like I had enough information to judge quality either, especially from their background materials that were just like, didn't really give me enough to go on. But yeah, those were my sort of initial thoughts.
Great, thank you. Jillian, can we pause the clock for a second? Thank you. So just to answer your question about ineligible activity, yes, they did have a date that was outside of the fiscal year. And the way that we recommend that you take this into account in your scoring is how much of what they propose is ineligible. If it's the whole project, then score it a 0. And if it's a part of the project, then you have to just decide whether you're going to score it a 3 or a 6. I will say that projects that have an eligible activity should not be scoring a 10. But thank you so much for that. What did others think? Jillian, we can unpause the clock now. Thank you.
Can I jump in? So I'll just say that I don't totally agree with Ladan's summation of this application. I hope that's okay if we don't agree. But I really liked this application. I thought that I really loved their mission, and I thought that their work seemed to be very intentional, and I saw that carried through the entire narrative of this application. I thought that it showed good quality of work, and although I will say that in the proposed project description, I did think that there were some details missing in terms of the how they were going to actually carry out all of the programs within the proposed project. So with that, I would have liked more information there, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And I'll just say, Lori, since you mentioned about agreement, consensus is not necessary for this process.
I'll jump in. So I agree with Ladan. I was left with a lot of questions, and I think what we're kind of discussing is about wanting more detail throughout the application. I also had a question about their primary audience. Like, is it okay that curators are the recipients?
Jillian, can we pause the clock again? Thank you. So yes, services to the field is definitely something that we fund. We tell applicants that they need to describe who their intended audience is. So as long as the project is for an intended audience that is not their own organization, as long as it's not internal capacity building, and the audience is in New York, or, it's a New York City public service, it's okay. Now you have to determine whether they do a good job of describing who their intended audience is, how they're doing the outreach, and what the impact is.
I think that's part of what you're picking up, Courtney, on what was part of what I was struggling with, because I don't have a problem with them serving curators, but I don't feel like there's enough information about how they are selected, or how they're targeting them, or how they're publicizing this, or like who they are. Yeah, I struggle with that too.
Yeah, and I also just wondered for the talks, like who's curating these talks and who's gauging the need for this intended community, like for that. They also mentioned the deaf and hard of hearing, ASL and CART, which I loved, but I didn't really get a sense of how they're reaching that community and what that targeted outreach looks like. And then, yeah, in terms of the budget, I also noticed a lot of inconsistencies between the project and the organization, but I didn't see a ton of notes in their budget. Did anybody else notice that?
Oh, the budget was terrible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Not only was it
Yeah.
like between the project and the organization, but like sometimes they didn't answer a question that they were asked directly. Um, and this is good. I was actually one of the higher scores, so I really appreciate hearing all this feedback because definitely some stuff that I missed. I will lift up some things that I thought were good in this application, though, maybe to not the sides, but as Loy says, there were some things that I thought were really good. I really appreciated that when they talked about impact in their project, but their project description, they did include some like hard data from previous years. They talked about a survey that they did where there was there was like a demonstrable or a measurable impact based on like increase in job opportunities and increase in confidence. And so I thought that track record was a good way of talking about potential future impact. I also like that they were doing um, an event in each borough. I think it just kind of spoke to the breadth of what they're doing, although obviously one of those is outside of the fiscal year. But yeah, definitely, as Concy said, as Courtney said, like the budget was really kind of a mess. And it was this sort of thing of like, there's lots of little errors. So in terms of feedback, I might say to them, like, really spend some time with your budget and make sure you're answering the questions that are being asked. Like something that you say in the budget note lines up with the figure that you get, the figure that you're giving. So just, that's just a small thing, but as we're kind of discussing, it can kind of add up to something that is a bigger problem in organizational accountability.
Yeah, and in terms of them serving curators, I was a little disappointed with what appeared to be a lack of depth of service. I mean, I think if you're going to focus on a small number of curators, you really should be clear about what they're going to walk away with. Like Dylan, I liked that they had the statistics, but I felt like there were no goals to actually measure those statistics up against. So, to me, the proposal, I mean, I started off excited, about the spirit of the proposal. But as we got into it, I just thought there weren't enough details to substantiate what they said they wanted to do. And at some point, I kind of even wondered, how do these activities align with what you said you want to do? And I wasn't even sure at some point. I was like, what are the structural fractures of the modern era that they say they're going to address? Like, what are they? You know, let us know what they are so we can understand the train of your thought process and why you actually selected these programs. And I think someone also mentioned, Lada, and you mentioned how the disability services component looks great, but I just was wondering, well, why? Why those
Yes, well, that
particular
exactly.
populations?
Yeah. Clearly, they've invested a lot in that
Yeah,
population, and I didn't quite see the connection. Like Courtney, you mentioned this too. Like, I want to, like, oh, does that because you're like you have a really large deaf and hard of hearing community that you need to be serving,
right.
or that's something that feedback that you've gotten. I feel like, yeah, that was something that was great, but then kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
Dylan, I agree with you about the surveys, but I feel like it didn't go far enough for me. So if I were to give this group some feedback, I think some examples would be really helpful. They really could use their supplemental, like background materials a little bit better there. Cause like, examples and bios and that kind of thing, I think kind of help with that quality question I had. And then also maybe fleshing out the statistics and the goals that they don't always flesh out for me.
Yeah, they didn't use the background materials at all to their benefit,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, thank you all so much for that robust conversation. We are now going to go ahead and rescore Nexus Art Collective. Once again, make sure that you're in the round 2 tab of your scorecard. Enter the scores for the 3 criteria. And make sure you save. It's very important that you save. So if you get logged out for any reason, you don't lose your scores. And again, as I mentioned earlier, consensus is not necessary. So just stay consistent to yourself and go ahead and rescore. I'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Sorry, I had one quick question.
Sure.
Are we determining today who's getting funding or?
No, that's a great question. So the way that it works is that we wait until the end of the panel season when all the panels are completed, which will be about early fall this year. And we look at all of the distinct panel scores for each application that went through panel, and then how much money we have in our budget, and we determine the funding threshold. So we won't know today who is getting funded or not funded. Just make sure that you're really sticking to the criteria and you're being consistent, and it'll all work out.
Okay, thanks.
I think I'm definitely going to change my score a little bit. Thanks for that, all of that good conversation.
Does anyone need more time?
Sorry,
All right.
just 1 second.
Okay.
Almost there. Okay.
Great. Thank you all so much. I'll pass it on to Audrey for our next application.
Thank you, Claudia. Now we will move on to our next application from Gotham Scene Works. You gave this application a total average round one score of 7.5. The Youth Vision Lab series provides one-to-one filmmaking mentorship for 60 NYC teens to produce original works centered on community identity. For the FY27 cycle, the series includes 4 distinct tracks: the Docs Lab 6-month intro, Advanced Fellows 7th-month documentary, and Narrative Studio 10-month fiction. Summer 2026 programming features a 4-week experimental lab and a dedicated inclusive lab specifically designed for neurodivergent creators. Students work directly with professional mentors to move from concept to screen, ensuring marginalized voices are equipped with technical and creative agency.
Okay, let's move on to this next slide. So after registering for the Pay Information Portal, PIP, input your vendor code into the panelist intake form and follow the rest of the prompts on the form to submit. Further instructions on how to register for PIP can also be viewed in the handbook. We will add the PIP help desk information to the chat. If after you reach out to PIP, you are in need of additional support, please reach out to the DCLA Panel and Operations Specialist, Jillian Fallon. Her email is also in the chat. By completing PIP and the intake form before your panel, you can expect to get paid approximately 8 weeks after your panel service. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've reached the Q&A portion of the presentation, which marks the final part of the training session. Please use the Q&A function to type your questions. To help us in answering your question, please make sure you typed inquiries that are comprehensive and as specific as possible.